Hello and welcome to the Frontline Bulletin. My name is Sam Richards and I've got some good information for you today. Remember, this newscast is available in both audio and video formats on the www.frontlinebulletin.com, along with a lot of other great stuff. On today's show, I'll identify the group that's behind the curtain, or at least behind the crackdown on Occupy and the surveillance state that's ever growing. I'll talk about opening day protests at the Minnesota Legislature, several large file dumps from the Minneapolis Police Department, and how to become members of the Bulletin community forums. So, the first and most pressing story, it looks like the security state and the corporate state merger has been in full effect for some time now, and has in fact consolidated into one decision-making entity, the DSAC, Domestic Security Alliance Council. Remember that name. This information was brought to light by the Partnership for Civil Justice Fund. That's the DSAC logo. As you can see, it says Federal Bureau of Investigation right on the bottom there. The Domestic Security Alliance Council, a strategic partnership between the FBI, Homeland Security, and the private sector. And just because it's at the end of the sentence doesn't mean it has a small role in this. The private sector makes up a huge chunk of the representatives on this body, including Minnesota's very own 3M. There are representatives from finance, that's a big one, food, pharmaceuticals, defense, telecoms, retail, etc. The group takes pride in the large market and GDP share the members represent. 34% of the gross domestic product of the U.S., according to their website. As of 2011, over 200 companies are included in the network. Grant Ashley is the chairperson, and he is also the vice president of Merck & Co. Now that you know a little about who DSAC is, here's what they do. They control the flow of money to groups that they don't like, and they're able to cut off that flow at a whim. Remember WikiLeaks, where if you donate online or try to donate, only 10% of those funds actually reach WikiLeaks because of the illegal banking blockade of PayPal and other groups. They spy on nonviolent activists who are exercising their constitutional rights, including trapwire. That's a big part of this. The group had a large grudge against Occupy for obvious reasons. They used the FBI as their own intelligence network. It has always been rumored that corporate interests has used the FBI and coerced him, but these documents confirm it in plain text. And they show that the Bureau is simply an agent of corporate America. The DSAC is heavily involved in the surveillance state. Tripwire, as we all know, is the fully functioning and fully operational CCTV camera network, and that includes any camera that's able to be hooked up to the internet it has access to. And it uses facial recognition software that is routed to the Department of Homeland Security, the NSA, and other domestic spy agencies. Just for the sake of time, here's a small operational example of what they had the FBI do in reaction to Occupy. It's called Operation Tripwire, not to be confused with Trapwire. From these documents, it can be learned that part, or at least small part of what Operation Tripwire was a plan to entrap activists in particularly poor areas to carry out extremist anti-government plots, or at least to begin to plan. They even use the words entrap in their own planning documents. This is insane, folks. But what's next is can only be characterized as maniacal. Immediately following their discussion on entrapping activists, they talk of a long-term plan to assassinate Occupy leaders via sniper fire. And that's a quote. The most disturbing part of that paragraph is the fact that they blanked out who was to do the sniping. That can only mean a couple of different things. Either A, they are protecting that person or group, B, they were party to the planning of that long-term plan, or C, it's still a card up their sleeve that they don't want to give away just yet. I'm not trying to fearmonger here, but it's really easy to. Look at the documents for yourself. They're posted on the Docs page of www.frontlinebulletin.com, and they're easy to find elsewhere on the internet, and I suggest downloading them before something happens and they get taken down. One can only hope that there will be follow-up appeal and future FOIA requests of that specific part of those documents. Now on to the next story, which is more close to home. Idle No More was at the state capitol, along with the North Star Energy Coalition and the Welfare Rights Committee, and several large union groups. They mostly did their own lobbying, but we bumped into them here and there. Idle No More, which started with First Nation chiefs, specifically Teresa Spence, going on hunger strike. She's been on hunger strike for over 30 days now. The North Star Energy Coalition is a breakaway group from Occupy Minneapolis, which is specifically tasked with trying to stop tar sands and Enbridge Oil Company pipeline from building more pipelines here and expanding their already tremendous reach. And the Welfare Rights Committee is focused on economic justice. Excuse me. So what happened was an early march from a nearby parking lot to the Capitol steps, where there was a brief a little bit of hand drumming, and quickly everybody flooded into the Capitol Rotunda, where for a little while it was mostly peaceful, with round dancing and hand drumming here and there, when suddenly, as you can tell by this, there was an altercation between the Capitol Guards, aka the Minnesota State Patrol, and the hand drummers. They quickly were stopped when the group noticed what was happening, belted out a quick couple of war cries which shook them the fear of God into the troopers, and they backed off for a little while. But the group quickly realized that there was going to be another altercation. So what happened was a very hasty people's wall, and that completely deterred the police from trying to do anything. While this was happening, the Minnesota troopers were citing a noise permit violation. This might have been true, but the civil rights part of the Constitution allows for this specific type of activity to go on without being interfered. The other interesting actions that took place that day, since it was about 6 hours of protest action at the Capitol for the opening day, the Welfare Rights Committee had 3 very large checks, kind of like the comical lottery-winning checks you see in movies or TV shows or something. Excuse me again. The checks were written out for $437 to Governor Dayton, the House and Senate Majority Leaders, to push them to raise the grants after 20-plus years of not raising the grants, almost 30 years. The checks were written $437 because that's how much money welfare is for an individual family per month, which is half of what the cost of living is now. And in an update on Idle No More, tonight, just a few hours before this was recorded, Teresa Spence and several other of the First Nation chiefs were set to meet with Governor General and the Canadian government officials that they requested. As soon as the results of that meeting come out, the bulletin will keep you posted and give you any updates. Now, for the next story, the MPD Dox that came out recently. You can find them online. Hongpong.com, aka the website for Dan Fight, was the first to point out this story. The first PDF that came out was 200 pages of Minneapolis Police Department emails and other little basically internal memos that went back and forth about how they were planning to deal with Occupy Minnesota. So the first thing that can be pointed out is that Mayor Ryback lied when the Occupy Minneapolis protesters confronted him after a very violent crackdown in an attempt to reoccupy Minneapolis at PV Plaza in Loring Park. The group went into his office, demanded a meeting, demanded him to explain why he hasn't stopped the police if he's such a big friend of the people, being that he's on the left and his administration and everything. And he said that there were no police specifically assigned to Occupy Minnesota. This is not true, as the documents told. 4 strike teams, at least, have been assigned to Occupy. And the interesting part of those is that the names listed on those strike teams, half of them are blocked out. That can only mean that the police are either still tasked with Occupy Minnesota or they were undercovers. Another interesting thing that came out of those documents is the Strategic Information Center, sort of a low-level fusion center in Fridley, Minnesota, and kind of hidden away in a industrial park next to the river. From those documents, we could ascertain that the Strategic Information Center's main goal was to spy on Occupy protesters' Facebook and Twitter feeds, including how many people were going to go to events, judging by the yes, no, and maybe counts on those events. There's even a funny part of those documents in were going back and forth trying to determine if a barbecue was actually going to happen. And the quote's something like, you can see for yourself, but it's something like, I'm not sure if they're throwing us for a loop with this barbecue and the meeting's actually elsewhere. It's kind of disturbing how much time they spent and how much money they spent just looking at people's Facebook pages. But that is all for now. Please check out the forums. They're pretty new, so there's not much activity on them yet, but I'm sure that in due time it'll be a nice little community that can last and get a lot of good work done. So be sure to follow us on Twitter at SamRichards10. Like us on Facebook by searching for the Frontline Bulletin. And yeah, give the forums a try. They're fun and easy. Thanks for giving the Bulletin a shot here, and enjoy this exit music. Until next time.